Lucian Bute is apparently making a huge comeback opponent-wise, as it appears that he will possibly, it seems like we'll be fighting Pascal in Quebec. Now, this is big because both fighters are huge ticket sellers in Canada. They're shooting for May 25th, and Bute would move up from 168 to 175 pounds to fight Pascal. My initial reaction is that it intrigues me. I'm incredibly interested in it. And maybe it's because, Robert, both of these fighters are coming off, well, they're coming off those sorts of losses in their careers where you thought that they would be better than that. You thought that they would possibly win that big fight, especially Lucian Bute when he got knocked out in what seems like a few rounds to Carl Froch, one of the most impressive performances I've seen from Froch against an opponent that apparently was hyped up more than he should have been and seemed inferior to the sorts of punches that we saw from Carl Froch, and he was hyped up. So, as I said, they both sell tickets enormously. My initial reaction is solid. What's yours?
I agree. Solid, especially if one's in Canada. Even more solid if one's up north of the border. It's a huge fight in Canadian terms. Probably will be the biggest fight in Canadian history in terms of gate and in terms of viewership. As you pointed out, both fighters have losses, pretty serious losses, and both of them are trying to sort of restore their lost luster. Whether or not this fight will restore the lost luster of both fighters is questionable. It will restore the luster of one of those fighters. I'm just not sure which one it is. I'm thinking it might be Bute, however.
Pascal, 30 years old, 27-2-1 with 16 knockouts. Of course, it's really interesting because, I mean, it seems like boxing is always crowded with controversy. This one, of course, has it as well. Now, this is interesting. Pascal was scheduled to fight Chad Dawson. He re-injured his shoulder in his last bout. Remember, he beat Chad Dawson in 2010. Now, he was out for 19 months after the loss to Bernard Hopkins. Here's a quick quote from Dawson's promoter, Gary Shaw. I met with Yvonne, as in Pascal's promoter, this week in New York, where he told me that Bedard, the Bute promoter, had offered him a fight with Bute, and he would put Dawson on the undercard, give him $600K, and would bring our own opponent. I told him I would never do that to my fighter on HBO. We finished lunch. I asked him, do we still have a fight? And Yvonne said yes, and shook my hand and said, we have a deal. That is everything I know. Yvonne has always been honest, and I would be very disappointed to find out that Yvonne has done anything underhanded. But remember, this is boxing, and stranger things have happened. When it comes down to it, Robert, as we all know, it comes down to the dollars, and it comes down to money. Against Chad Dawson, he would make roughly in the ballpark of $500,000 to $700,000. If he were to fight Bute in Canada, he would make what seems like a minimum $2 million. As I have given the viewers and you, Robert Exel, all of that information, what's your take on that?
Well, that's your answer right there. Of course, money talks and bullshit walks. I mean, I love Gary Shaw. I mean, I love Boy Scouts in wolves' clothing. Nevertheless, I don't really believe that there's much interest in anybody really watching Chad Dawson. I mean, Dawson is a good fighter, but he is certainly not a scintillating talent. And here you have like basically two Canadian juggernauts going at each other. I mean, it seems as though, I mean, this is really, at least in Canadian terms, this is where the interest is going to be in watching Bute and Pascal, fight one another. Another question that keeps coming up with me is whether HBO would be interested in this fight. I have my doubts, only because both fighters are sort of on the downside of their careers, albeit slightly perhaps, and they are in the business of building attractions, and neither fighter is that much of an attraction, in part because of their losses, in part because of the sort of demographic that follows these two fighters. So I'm not sure that HBO is interested in this fight. I'm interested to see what the upshot is in that regard.
Bute, the former super middleweight title holder, 31-1 with 24 knockouts. He is 32 years old, the older fighter in this fight. you know, why? I mean, I understand from an American perspective. However, from a boxing fan's perspective, granted, it seems like we're a dime a dozen. Why wouldn't HBO want to buy this fight? These are two good fighters. Granted, they were hyped up. Jean Pascal brings that Carl Froch-like power against Lucian Bute, who many people are still giving a chance. They are still standing up for him, saying, you know what, this is the last straw. This is the last time that I'm going to fight for you in conversation, in debates with friends and boxing fans in forums, in the comments sections, what have you. So from a boxing fan's perspective, you know, HBO can put out real sports, they can put out 24/7, Hard Knocks, what have you. But when it comes down to it, on Saturday night, unless it's a freaking movie that's playing, it's boxing after dark, it's late night boxing. Why wouldn't they want to put this on?
I agree with you completely, and it's not a question that I can answer, except that it's in Canada. It's not convenient, perhaps. And again, it's a question of the kind of audience. There's a lot that goes on with HBO. I mean, is Al Heyman involved in either of these fighters? I mean, there are so many permutations involved in who gets onto HBO, because HBO is still the premier venue, and not everybody who deserves to be on HBO is on HBO. So it really remains to be seen. I understand your point of view completely, and I agree with you completely. There's nothing I'd rather do on a Saturday night than watch HBO. And yet, they do pick and they do choose their fights. And whether or not they're going to pick and choose and decide to broadcast this fight is open to question.
And another date that has been thrown around is May 25th. That's when Carl Froch fights Mikael Kessler. So that's also interesting as well, whether HBO can maybe put one before the other. It's it would be difficult, in my opinion. I would rather see, Froch Kessler, May 25th, and maybe the next week or the week before they put Bute Pascal. But either way, I would love to see this. Excuse me. I would love to see this on HBO, and I don't know any boxing fan that would not want to see this, because both of them have a lot to prove. And when you have those sorts of guys in the ring who have a lot to prove and still need to, granted they're both going to get paid, and if this, if the matchmakers confirm, and this is a for sure done deal, signed, sealed, delivered, they both have a lot to prove, and those are usually the fights that I certainly like to watch. So Robert Exel, thank you so much for the time as always. You could follow him on Twitter at boxing_com, and follow his great writing at www.boxing.com. His Facebook page is also in the description below, along with TYT Sports'. Robert, thank you so much for the time, and we will talk to you again soon.
Okay, Rick, thank you.